Hi, my name is Keith Barrett, founder and president of Vesta Settlements. In this video, we're going to discuss some basics of FIRPTA, or the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. Now, before we go too far, let me make a very clear disclaimer. FIRPTA can be complicated. It is based out of the tax code. I've only read about 100 of the 15,000 pages that are contained in the tax code, and nothing that is said in this video is in any way a replacement for professional tax advice from a CPA or a tax attorney. The purpose of this video is just to go over some real basic stuff and perhaps allow you to red flag some issues in transactions going forward. So FIRPTA. So really the purpose of FIRPTA was there was a concern that foreign individuals were buying U.S. real property, selling it, presumably at a profit, and then not paying the required tax on that. This was a problem, and so FIRPTA was enacted, again, Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act, which then created a withholding requirement in those situations to be sure that Treasury would get their money. So here's basically how it works. In a real estate transaction in which the seller is a non-resident alien, so not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, otherwise a green card holder. In those situations, there may be a withholding requirement. Here's how the withholding works. We start with the general proposition that the withholding is 15% of the sales price, but we have to kind of peel away a couple layers of the onion here. So if the sales price is over $1 million, the withholding is 15%. If the sales price is not over $1 million, but over $300,000, and the buyer is going to use the property as their primary residence, the withholding is 10%. If the withholding is $300,000 or less, and the buyer is going to use the property as their primary residence, then there is no withholding. So it's kind of this graduated scale. Under $300,000 and the buyer is going to use it as their primary residence, no withholding. Over $300,000 but less than $1 million, 10%, and then over $1 million, 15%. There are some other exceptions as well. There's an exception called the substantial presence test, which really for purposes of this video is beyond the scope. It's actually a somewhat complicated analysis that deals with literal physical presence within the U.S. It could be 183 days in the current year, and you can go back about 2 years before that, but days are not considered whole days in those prior years. For example, in the year immediately preceding, 1 day of presence is actually counted as a third of the day, and then in the year prior to that, 1 day of presence is counted as 1/6 of the day, and then you add up all three, and if you get over 183, you might qualify for an exception. Again, a little beyond the scope of the video, but just so you know, there are other exceptions out there. Here's what a lot of people don't know. It's actually the buyer that is charged with the responsibility for the withholding. Now, of course, at closing, it's the title companies that typically will take care of that, and certain additional documents have to be filled out. If you're curious and you want to take a look at them, they're called the 8288 and the 8288A. These are IRS documents that need to be filled out by both the buyer and the seller. And of course, the title company will then withhold whatever the amount is, whether it be 15 or 10%. And within 20 days of the transfer, those documents and the withholding will be sent to the IRS. Now, practical tips. In the standard listing agreements, we have a provision in FIRPTA that should alert the listing agent as to the possibility that it is a FIRPTA case. And, of course, we have a fairly new provision in our contract that deals specifically with FIRPTA, where the seller has to make a proactive representation that they are a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. That is a tip-off as well. The best thing that you can do in a FIRPTA situation is to advise the seller to go seek advice and counsel, because it is possible to apply with the IRS for what's called a withholding certificate. And it's essentially additional documents that are sent to the IRS with required information, of course, and the IRS can make a decision about whether the full withholding will be required, some lesser withholding will be required, or perhaps no withholding. And if that document is received for the transaction, essentially by the title company, we can go ahead and follow what the IRS says in that document. Now, little problem with it though. The IRS says that it takes them up to 90 days to turn around a decision on a withholding certificate. So given the fact that our typical closings are between 30 and 50 days, the timing's not great there, but nonetheless, I think something that if you start early in the process could be very helpful. So please make sure that the contracts are filled out properly, the right box is checked for FIRPTA. Again, it's asking whether the seller is a citizen or lawful permanent resident, so if they are, the box for yes should be checked. And of course, we have a new FIRPTA addendum as well, so if that is relevant, if the box for no is checked, then of course you're going to check at the end of the paragraph your additions for that FIRPTA addendum and fill out that addendum properly. And that is some basic information on FIRPTA. Again, a fairly complicated subject. If you have additional questions, don't hesitate to contact us. And as always, doing business with Vesta is easy. Send your contracts to contracts@vestasettlements.com. Thank you.